Ethan Rivera parked his sedan in the gravel driveway of the Redwood Cottage on Pinewood Drive, heart fluttering with excitement. He had waited years to buy a home, countless overtime hours, careful savings, and a steadfast dream of owning a place where he could finally unwind. This day was his personal milestone, a testament to perseverance. With the keys in hand, he stepped through the creaking front gate, appreciating the warm afternoon sun glinting off the cottage's windows. Inside, the living room echoed with emptiness. Piles of neatly labeled boxes lined the walls, half unpacked. Each box hinted at the life Ethan was about to forge here: a well-worn guitar, some battered cooking pans from his old apartment, a small but beloved collection of books. He smiled to himself, imagining how he'd arrange the furniture, the meals he'd cook in the bright kitchen, and the sense of peace he'd finally savor after years of living in rentals. Yet, as he began unpacking a box of dishes, a sharp knock on the front door jolted him. Setting the plates aside, he ambled over, half expecting a friendly neighbor eager to introduce themselves. Instead, he found a woman, her posture rigid, gaze pinning him on the spot. The name Clara flitted to mind. He vaguely recalled seeing it on an HOA mailing list. She had short, precisely styled hair and wore a stiff expression that betrayed no warmth. "Hello," Ethan offered, forcing a polite smile. "Can I help you?" Clara wasted no time with pleasantries. She surveyed Ethan as though he were an intruder. "I'm here to see who's renting this place," she announced, voice clipped. "This is a private community, we don't just let anyone move in." Her words bristled with presumption, as though Ethan's presence required her personal approval. Confused, Ethan gestured inside. "I'm not renting," he explained calmly. "I'm the owner, just moved in today." Clara's eyebrows arched skeptically. She peered past him into the half-empty living room, eyes flicking over the stacked boxes. "I wasn't informed of any sale," she retorted. "And as a leading voice in the neighborhood board, I keep track of these matters." Ethan swallowed the flare of annoyance. He reminded himself that he wanted to start on a positive note with the community. "Well, I have all the paperwork if you'd like to see it," he said, stepping back slightly. But Clara brushed off the offer with a dismissive wave. "I'll find out soon enough," she muttered. "If you're lying about owning the Redwood Cottage, the HOA will have an issue. We don't tolerate squatters or hidden rentals here on Pinewood Drive." With that, Clara turned on her heel and strode away, leaving Ethan at the threshold of his new home, a swirl of unease in her wake. He closed the door, heart pounding from the unexpected confrontation. For months, he'd pictured a serene move-in day, a time to enjoy the fruits of his hard work. Instead, he faced a neighbor who questioned his very right to be there. Unsure what else to do, Ethan returned to his unpacking, steeling himself for what might follow in a community where a single neighbor could cast such immediate doubt on his ownership. Early the next morning, Ethan Rivera found himself standing on the porch of the Redwood Cottage, the sunrise bathing Pinewood Drive in soft, golden light. He was sipping coffee, mentally listing the errands he needed to tackle, setting up internet, verifying the final mortgage paperwork, and maybe grabbing a few more boxes from storage. His tranquil routine, however, was short-lived. As he stepped down to retrieve the mail from the creaky old box, he spotted a figure approaching from the street. It was Clara again, the same woman who'd appeared hours after his arrival, questioning the legitimacy of his home purchase. She walked briskly, as if on a mission. Ethan tensed, recalling how easily she challenged his presence on this property. "Good morning," he offered cautiously, hoping a friendly tone might diffuse any tension. Clara did not return the greeting. "I asked around," she announced, arms folded. "No one in this neighborhood has any record of a sale to an Ethan Rivera. The Redwood Cottage was never listed publicly." Ethan frowned. "I bought it from the previous owner through a private sale," he said. "Everything was handled legally, I have the closing documents." She sniffed, unimpressed. "Then why haven't you filed them with the HOA?" Her comment dripped with condescension, as though Ethan had deliberately bypassed a crucial step. He resisted the urge to roll his eyes. "I was told the property wasn't under strict HOA rules," he replied, rummaging through the mail. "But if I need to update some registry, I will." "No problem." Clara didn't appear mollified. "It is a problem," she insisted. "We have rules, even for small corners of Pinewood Drive. If you're truly the owner, you must submit your deed and fill out occupancy forms. You can't just waltz in and squat." She leaned in, scanning his face for a hint of guilt. Ethan took a measured breath. "I'm not squatting. My realtor told me there was minimal HOA involvement, maybe I misunderstood. But I'll clarify." He tried to keep the frustration out of his voice. He'd never encountered an HOA quite so intrusive, and the fact that Clara had singled him out fueled his growing suspicion about her real motives. She thrust a folded letter into his hand. "Consider this an official notice," she said briskly. "We have reason to believe you're occupying Redwood Cottage without proper documentation. Expect a follow-up from the board soon." Ethan's pulse quickened as he skimmed the letter's text. Words like violation, delinquent rent fees, and unauthorized occupancy leapt from the page. It was all nonsense, but official-sounding nonsense, something that could complicate his life if left unchallenged. "You'll be hearing from me," Clara declared before spinning around. She left as abruptly as she'd arrived, glancing over her shoulder as though expecting Ethan to crumble under her ultimatum. Instead, he stood rooted to the spot, the morning sun still illuminating the porch. The warm glow felt at odds with the cold fear creeping into his chest. This was no trivial misunderstanding. Clara seemed bent on treating him like a trespasser. Shaking off the dread, Ethan resolved to gather every piece of legal proof. He would not let a single neighbor's accusations overshadow the fresh start he'd carved out for himself at the Redwood Cottage. With a final sip of his coffee, he stepped inside, bracing for the inevitable clash with the so-called board behind Clara's claims. Darius Vaughn had barely finished celebrating his move into a cozy bungalow on Evergreen Drive when a bizarre notice arrived in his mailbox. Stamped with officious lettering, it accused him of unauthorized occupancy, and demanded immediate payment of delinquent rent fees. Confused, Darius examined the page. It featured references to an old lease that predated his purchase. The entire notion was laughable. He'd purchased the bungalow outright. So who was behind this nonsense? His confusion morphed into mild alarm upon noticing a signature at the bottom, Karen. Darius recalled their brief run-in the day before, where she demanded he prove he owned the property. She'd mentioned something about the local community board, but he hadn't taken her too seriously, until now. The letter threatened legal action if he failed to rectify the violation. Determined to clarify matters, Darius gathered his deed, mortgage statements, and ID, then stepped outside. He spotted Karen pacing on the sidewalk, phone in hand, as though waiting for him to confront her. She gave him a tight-lipped smile when he approached. "Got my notice, did you?" she asked, voice dripping with feigned politeness. "Yes," Darius replied evenly, "but it's incorrect. I'm the homeowner, not a tenant. There's no rent." He offered to show her the deed, but Karen waved him off. "I'll decide whether you own it or not," she sniffed. "No record says you do, and the board wasn't informed." She brandished her phone, as though prepared to film any reaction he might have. Fighting the urge to roll his eyes, Darius persisted. "Look, I'm sure we can solve this calmly. Just check with county records or the official sale documents." Instead of listening, Karen tapped her phone screen, presumably drafting another complaint. "You have 24 hours to correct your status," she pronounced. "Failing that, you'll face eviction proceedings. We don't allow squatters on Evergreen Drive." Darius's jaw tightened. He recognized the undercurrent of malice in her threats. She wasn't simply confused, she was determined to force him out, capitalizing on any bureaucracy she could manipulate. Eager to quell the fiasco before it escalated, he offered a final calm suggestion: "If you contact the county clerk, you'll see my name on the deed. I have every right to be here. But Karen merely smirked. We'll see. With that, she walked away, phone still capturing footage. Darius stood there, heart pounding, a mixture of disbelief and simmering frustration. He realized that reason alone might not sway someone so entrenched in a false narrative. Inside, the day's sunshine and half-unpacked boxes felt overshadowed by an oncoming storm of petty legal battles. Retreating to the bungalow's porch, Darius resolved to gather every shred of evidence. He would not cede an inch of ground to Karen's intimidation. There was simply too much at stake. This place was his home, and he refused to let a stranger's baseless hostility strip him of his hard-won sanctuary. Graham Novak awoke to a bright morning, determined to tackle the day's errands for his brother Colin's upcoming wedding. Life on Sunrise Path had seemed serene when Graham first moved in, but that notion evaporated after Astrid challenged his ownership of the house, then escalated her campaign by delivering an official violation notice. According to her letter, Graham was supposedly an unauthorized tenant owing back rent. The absurdity stung. He recalled the second he laid eyes on her, the suspicious glint in her eye, her tone dripping with condescension. Now, as he sipped coffee near the half-open boxes of wedding decor, a sharp rap sounded at the door. Graham tensed, setting aside his mug. Through the peephole, he recognized Astrid's short bob hairstyle, accompanied by a stern-faced policeman, Officer Penn, presumably. With a sigh, Graham braced for another confrontation. When he opened the door, Astrid stepped forward, clipboard in hand, skipping any greeting. Graham Novak, she announced, I'm here to present you with a final demand. She thrust out a sheaf of papers, each bearing ominous language about eviction procedures and rent obligations. Her gaze flicked to the pastel ribbons and seat covers behind him, as though searching for any reason to doubt he owned the place. Officer Penn cleared his throat, nodding politely to Graham. I'm just here to keep things peaceful, he offered, though his posture remained alert. Astrid, seeming emboldened by the officer's presence, stiffened her spine. According to our neighborhood records, you're not recognized as the rightful owner, she claimed. Thus, you must sign a lease immediately. Otherwise, we'll proceed with legal action. Graham blinked in disbelief. A lease for my own property, he asked, voice calm despite the anger churning within. I have the deed, the mortgage documents, everything. Astrid's lips curled in a mirthless smile. Those can be fabricated, she said dismissively. I've dealt with frauds before. We, the community board, will not let an imposter mooch off our resources. The utter gall of her assumption took Graham aback. Imposter, he echoed softly, trying to maintain composure. I purchased this house outright. Why would I pay rent to you or anyone else? Astrid snorted, flipping through pages on her clipboard. You either sign or we file complaints that you're illegally occupying the premises. With enough pressure, you'll be forced out. Officer Penn raised a hand to intervene. Ms. Astrid, he said gently, maybe we should see Mr. Novak's documents before pushing a lease. But she waved him off, refusing to compromise. Her approach felt less about genuine confusion and more about extortion. She was making demands that promised financial gain or at least a forced exit. Unwilling to dance around the issue, Graham calmly stated, I'm not signing anything. I won't pay rent for a house I own. You can threaten all you like, but the law is on my side. The policeman's eyes flicked between them, clearly noting the tension. Astrid's cheeks flushed, a spark of resentment blazing in her gaze. Then you leave me no choice, she hissed, snapping her clipboard shut with finality. Expect a formal complaint from the HOA, plus lawsuits for back rent. Mark my words. Stepping back, she shot Graham a last glare, pivoted on her heel, and marched off. Officer Penn lingered a moment, awkwardly adjusting his belt. Mr. Novak, he said, voice low, maybe you can provide proof of ownership to the HOA or the precinct. This dispute might be resolved with official records. Graham nodded curtly. Of course. I have everything. I just never imagined I'd need a policeman to confirm my own house. The officer offered a thin smile. I understand. Let's keep this civil, okay? Then he followed Astrid down the path, the crunch of gravel underfoot fading as they disappeared. Only once they'd gone did Graham let his anger wash over him. He inhaled, forcibly calming his nerves. The day had barely begun, and already he felt drained by Astrid's manipulative tactics. Part of him worried about the stress overshadowing Colin's wedding festivities. But he reminded himself that evidence, not intimidation, would prevail. In the quiet of the house, amid bright wedding decorations, he resolved to gather every shred of documentation, ensuring no cracks existed in his ownership claim. He'd not sign anything or pay a penny in rent for his own property. If Astrid insisted on a battle, he would face it with calm determination, this time, with the truth on his side. Hunter Caldwell carefully set aside the mountain of half-assembled wedding invitations that cluttered the dining table. The morning's tension lingered in the air at Meadowview Lane, where the notion of a peaceful day had been shattered by Karen's brazen attempt to force him into signing a so-called lease agreement. Despite brandishing the property deed and loan papers, Hunter found himself locked in a battle against a neighbor bent on extorting him under the guise of community protocol. Earlier, Officer Malik had accompanied Karen, presumably to maintain civility. Yet the officer's uncertain posture showed he wasn't fully convinced who was in the right, Karen's drama or Hunter's calm evidence. Karen insisted that the property wasn't truly in Hunter's name, that he needed to pay rent. The absurdity hadn't wavered her confidence. In a single breath, she'd threatened lawsuits, claiming the HOA empowered her to regulate unverified occupants. Now, hours later, Hunter refused to sign a single document from Karen's clipboard. He recognized the ploy as borderline extortion. Pay rent or face legal consequences. Each time he pointed out the official county stamps on his purchase agreement, she brushed it aside, retorting that documents could be forged. Hunter suppressed the urge to roll his eyes. Let her try to wave around made-up authority, he wasn't backing down. A knock at the door brought him back to the moment. He opened it cautiously, expecting a second wave of confrontation. Instead, he found Officer Malik alone, hat in hand. Mr. Caldwell, the officer said quietly, I'd like to review your ownership proof away from Karen's influence. If you don't mind. His voice carried an apologetic note, as though he recognized how vexing the morning had been. Hunter gestured for him to enter. I have the deed, the mortgage statements, everything is valid. He lifted a folder off the coffee table, handing it to Malik. The officer sat on a stool, flipping through each page meticulously. The formal stamps, the notarized seals, and the recorded date left no question of authenticity. Malik exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. This does appear legitimate, Mr. Caldwell, he acknowledged. I suspect Ms. Karen jumped to conclusions. Tension bled from Hunter's shoulders. He longed for a swift resolution, so he could focus on the wedding and the joys of fresh homeownership. If Karen believed in good faith that I was squatting, I'd forgive a misunderstanding, he said evenly, but she's demanding rent for a home she doesn't own. That's extortion. Malik nodded, brow creased. I can't speak for her motives, but from a legal standpoint, your claim stands. She can't force you to pay rent if you're the documented owner. The front door abruptly swung open, revealing Karen standing on the threshold, phone in hand. Officer, I hope you see that forging documents is easy, she declared, jabbing a finger at the folder. Her posture radiated indignation, as if she believed the policeman would instantly side with her. But Malik's face remained impassive. Ms. Karen, he said, these records appear legitimate. Unless you have equal or stronger evidence, your claims might be unfounded. She stiffened, lips pressed in a thin line. I have testimonies from neighbors, none of whom saw a sale. And my own inspection of the county database turned up no public listing. Malik let out a tired sigh, explaining, not all sales are public, Ms. Karen. Some are private. And if Mr. Caldwell's documents match county stamps, that's typically conclusive. Hunter seized the moment to reaffirm his refusal. "I'm not signing your lease," he stated, voice firm. "I owe you no rent. I'm not leaving. This is my home." As Karen's scowl deepened, the officer rose from the stool, returning the folder to Hunter. "Given what I see, Ms. Karen," he said gently but clearly, "I can't support forcing him to sign anything. If you disagree, you might consult the courts. But as of now, I have no grounds to act against Mr. Caldwell." Realizing she was momentarily thwarted, Karen let out a frustrated huff, jabbing at her phone again as if planning some new tactic. She gave the officer a curt nod, turned to Hunter, and spat, "We'll see about that." With that, she stalked out, letting the screen door slam behind her. Malik offered a sad smile, mumbling, "I'm sorry you have to deal with this." Then he, too, departed, presumably to file a minimal report. Alone again, Hunter closed the folder, chest tightening at the realization that the confrontation was far from over. Karen's final glare promised further steps. Yet, for now, he'd withstood the pressure to sign away his rights. Tucking the folder under his arm, he walked back to the half-assembled wedding decor, determined not to let her intimidation overshadow the joy this new chapter of his life was meant to bring. Owen Bradley had barely managed to stave off Karen's bogus lease demands when fresh chaos emerged. After a draining day sorting through half a dozen contradictory notices, he returned to his address on Rosewood Street, eager for a quiet night. The wedding for his brother Theo loomed in a couple of days, and he yearned for a respite from the swirl of tension. Yet, as he approached his front door, something felt off. He fished for his keys, inserted one into the lock, and it wouldn't budge. Initially, he feared a jam, but a closer look revealed fresh scratches around the keyhole. The lock had been changed. A rush of alarm thundered through him. Who would switch the lock on his own home? Heart pounding, Owen tested the handle, locked. Gathering his courage, he moved around to the back entrance, discovering it unlatched. Carefully, he stepped inside, flipping the light switch in the dim hallway. Voices in the living room set his pulse racing. The deeper he ventured, the more evident it became, someone was inside. Rounding the corner, he froze at the sight of Karen, perched on his sofa, sipping a glass of red wine from his own kitchenware. She greeted him with a raised eyebrow, a twisted smile on her lips, as though welcoming a trespasser. "What are you doing here?" Owen asked, voice low with shock. He spotted the replaced door hardware set aside on a table, as if Karen had brazenly performed a mini-home renovation. She shrugged with theatrical nonchalance, swirling her wine. "This house was abandoned," she declared, "so I let myself in. A place like this shouldn't go to waste." Fury surged through Owen, though he struggled to keep it contained. "Abandoned? I've lived here for days, dealing with your attempts to collect fake rent. You changed my locks, this is breaking and entering." But Karen sipped calmly, ignoring the condemnation in his tone. "You left the premises unlocked, from my perspective," she said flatly. "Squatters' rules." Her remark dripped with the same condescending logic that fueled her previous demands. Before he could respond, she reached for her phone, pressing a button. "Officer Ming," she announced to no one in particular, "I'll have to report this trespass." Owen realized with horror that she was calling the police, framing him as an intruder in his own house. Each ring felt like an echo of a looming crisis, the untruth of her story overshadowing his rightful claim. Desperate to avert a disastrous altercation, Owen rummaged for his phone, calling the station's non-emergency line. While Karen spoke to 911, spinning a tale of a threatening stranger forcing entry, he recounted the truth. He owned the house, had proof, and that a woman was inside without permission. The dispatcher assured him a unit would respond. Minutes later, flashing blue lights illuminated the windows. The living room's tension soared as Officer Ming entered, radio crackling. Karen jumped up, pressing her advantage. "Officer, this man is trespassing," she declared, pointing at Owen. "I came to check on the place." He forced his way in. Ming turned to Owen. "Sir, is that correct?" The suspicious glint in the officer's eye told him he needed immediate clarity. Owen squared his shoulders. "No, officer. I own this property, and she changed my locks. There's evidence, new hardware, my original lock thrown aside, her wineglass here. She had no right to be inside." At that moment, he drew out his ID and quickly scanned for the property deed in a folder on a side table. He'd stashed it earlier, anticipating more trouble from Karen. "Look," he said, handing it over, "official proof. This is my house." Officer Ming studied the papers, eyes flicking from Owen's name to the address. Meanwhile, Karen paced, phone camera rolling, claiming the documents might be forged. Yet the officer took a moment to confirm the official stamps and match them with the local property database via his car's onboard system. The result was straightforward: Owen was indeed the rightful owner. Realizing the truth, the officer turned to Karen, who still clutched the wineglass. "Ma'am," he said, "it appears you've entered someone's house without lawful cause. That's breaking and entering. And your 911 call alleging this man was trespassing could be deemed a false report." For the first time, Karen's haughtiness wavered. She opened her mouth to protest, but Ming cut her off, summoning backup to handle the potential arrest. Owen exhaled, relief and anger warring inside him. The occupant of his own living room had tried to label him a trespasser. But thanks to timely evidence, the officer recognized the real trespasser was Karen herself. The wail of sirens outside signaled additional officers arriving, ready to finalize what had become a bizarre showdown. Owen turned his gaze to the half-finished wedding decorations scattered across the floor, hoping that once this fiasco concluded, he could finally focus on celebrating his brother's big day, free from Karen's intrusive, irrational attempts to claim a home that never belonged to her. Miles D'Angelo was almost numb to Karen's theatrics by the time she dialed 911, accusing him of attempted lockpicking and trespassing in his own house at Bay Point Villas. She clutched the phone with a rigid stance, barking details into the receiver, conjuring the image of a threat that simply did not exist. But this time, Miles had decided enough was enough. As he watched her spin lies to the dispatcher, he calmly slipped a small leather wallet from his jacket pocket, feeling the weight of a carefully guarded identity inside. When Officer Reyes pulled up minutes later, stepping out of his patrol car with an air of practiced professionalism, Karen wasted no time painting Miles as a dangerous figure. She pointed dramatically at him, phone's camera aimed to capture every breath he took. "He's forcing entry, officer," she exclaimed, ignoring the fact that the replaced lock was already in her hand. The policeman's skeptical gaze flicked from her to Miles, who simply raised an eyebrow in silent disagreement. Miles then revealed his wallet's hidden item, a sleek identification card bearing the emblem of the FBI. He said nothing, just held it where Officer Reyes could see. The reaction was immediate. The policeman stiffened, reading the name Miles D'Angelo beneath a government seal. Even Karen hesitated, phone tilting slightly downward as she registered the significance. You're FBI?" she stammered, confusion crossing her face. "Special Agent," Miles confirmed quietly, though he disliked flaunting the title. He'd chosen Bay Point Villas for a calm, nondescript retirement from active fieldwork. "And you're calling 911 to label me a trespasser in my own home?" He delivered the question with the calm intensity that had served him in countless interrogation rooms. Instead of responding, Karen spluttered half-formed excuses about not knowing and just trying to protect the neighborhood. Officer Reyes coughed, regaining composure. "Let me see some proof of ownership," he requested, though his voice now carried a hint of respect. Miles nodded, producing the same set of documents he'd used to close on the house. The policeman scrutinized the official seals and signatures, occasionally glancing at Karen. Meanwhile, she hovered at the edge, phone lowered, her once haughty expression replaced by evident alarm. Realization dawned across the policeman's face. He studied the battered old lock on the ground, recalled Karen's frantic claims about abandoned property, and added it all up. The mix of evidence, the false 911 call, the forced lock change, Miles's unimpeachable credentials, left no doubt about the day's true culprit. "Ms. Karen," he began, stepping toward her. "I'm placing you under arrest for breaking and entering, theft, and filing a false police report." Her eyes widened, phone trembling in her grip. But I thought, he was," she protested, voice hollow. Miles let out a breath he'd been unconsciously holding. The tension in his chest eased as he watched Karen's bravado dissolve. The policeman radioed for backup, citing the need for transport and formal booking. In the hush that followed, neighbors peeked from behind curtains and vehicles, witnessing the downfall of a neighbor who had boasted of authority she never had. Karen, now with handcuffs clinking around her wrists, tried to defend her actions. "I was just making sure no one took advantage of an empty house." But Officer Reyes shook his head. "That doesn't explain the changed locks or your refusal to acknowledge Mr. D'Angelo's documents, Ms. Karen." He guided her to the squad car, ignoring her sputtering excuses. Miles collected the scattered key pieces from the ground, evidence of Karen's attempt to occupy a property that never belonged to her. A cluster of onlookers along Bay Point Villas exhaled in collective relief or mild shock. Some recognized Miles, marveling at the quiet man's FBI background, while others murmured half-sympathetic opinions about Karen, acknowledging that her prejudice and manipulative streak had led her here. But for Miles, the top priority was reclaiming his rightful peace. His locked front door no longer felt like a boundary to be tested but a threshold he could cross freely, unburdened by someone else's hateful illusions. "Thank you, officer," Miles said, voice subdued as Reyes offered him the final incident report. With the car's red and blue lights fading into the distance, Miles stepped back inside, shutting the door on the swirling storm that had haunted him since moving day. A wry grin tugged at his lips. He never expected to leverage his FBI badge in a suburban property spat. But if that's what it took to preserve normalcy, so be it. The living room still lay strewn with wedding decor for his brother, an uplifting reminder that life would move on beyond Karen's attempted sabotage. And for the first time since all this began, Miles felt a genuine sense of home in Bay Point Villas. In the days following Karen's dramatic arrest at Harborside Villas, a hush seemed to blanket the neighborhood. Major Dante Ace Bishop, having finally secured his home and proven its rightful ownership, felt a surge of relief. He'd endured Karen's false claims of trespassing, unauthorized occupancy, and an outrageous attempt to extort him for rent. Now that she faced charges for breaking and entering, theft, and filing a false report, her once brash presence receded from daily life. Word of Karen's arrest rippled through Harborside Villas like a gust of wind across the marina. Residents who had witnessed the confrontation told their friends. Rumors took on new details, morphing into cautionary tales about underestimating the quiet new neighbor who turned out to be a formidable opponent. The local HOA board, initially swayed by Karen's allegations, hastily retracted any violation notices they had issued at her urging. They extended a formal apology to Dante, acknowledging their oversight in not verifying her claims more thoroughly. Despite the tension's ebb, an undercurrent of curiosity lingered. Neighbors approached Dante with polite inquiries, half apologies in their eyes. Some recalled seeing him in uniform. He'd been a major in a branch of military intelligence before settling here, and realized they'd made the mistake of doubting someone who quietly commanded respect. Others, who had once aligned with Karen's self-proclaimed authority, now distanced themselves from her, fearful of being tainted by her downfall. Jared Bishop, Dante's younger brother, visited soon after. Stepping into the living room, he found wedding decorations half-finished but scattered as though a tornado had passed through. "Big brother," he joked, "I leave you alone for a week, and you take down a crooked neighbor all by yourself." Dante smirked, shrugging modestly. "Just doing what needed to be done," he quipped. The ordeal had overshadowed the final wedding tasks, but both men resolved to get back on track and focus on the upcoming ceremony. Meanwhile, Officer Bennett, who had initially questioned Dante's occupancy, stopped by to finalize the incident report. He offered a conciliatory handshake. "Sir," he said, "we deeply regret the confusion. The evidence you provided and the legal records made everything crystal clear." Dante nodded, grateful that the officer owned up to the missteps and recognized the truth. Bennett assured him that any further attempts by Karen to manipulate the system would be met with appropriate scrutiny. With each day, Karen's name faded from the community's routine conversation. Residents recognized her as a prime example of how prejudice and entitlement could backfire spectacularly. The fishermen near the docks, the dog walkers along the promenade, all embraced Dante as a welcome part of harborside villas, leaving behind the distrust that once tinged their glances. A sense of tranquility settled over Dante's life. The arrest, while dramatic, had sealed Karen's fate. She would face legal accountability, an outcome her own actions had invoked. Now, freed from the malicious drama, Dante smiled as he tucked away the final box of wedding decor. The next time neighbors gathered, it would be for a celebratory toast to new beginnings, not a confrontation mired in false allegations and hate. Once Karen's arrest reverberated through Ocean View Estate, a wave of collective exhalation seemed to wash over the neighborhood. For Ezra Coleman, the relief was tangible, as if an invisible weight had lifted from his chest. No more dealing with fake rent notices, no more responding to false trespassing claims, and no more bracing for the next round of bizarre harassment. The entire fiasco had culminated in the best possible outcome. The truth prevailed. During the days that followed, various neighbors approached Ezra with awkward smiles or small gifts, referencing the wedding decor they'd seen scattered around his home. Some apologized sheepishly for ever believing Karen's bold accusations about unverified ownership or suspicious occupant. They admitted they'd been swayed by her loud insistence and the presence of Officer Rios, who'd initially lent credence to her claims before verifying the actual deed. Yet, the final revelation of Ezra's rightful ownership, and Karen's blatant wrongdoing, had reshaped opinions swiftly. Meanwhile, the HOA board, once swayed by Karen's persuasive rhetoric about keeping the neighborhood safe, held an emergency meeting to address the scandal. A statement was released, acknowledging that multiple complaints had been filed against Ezra under false pretenses. They vowed to implement stricter verification procedures, ensuring no single individual could manipulate the system to target an innocent homeowner again. To Ezra's relief, they even offered him a formal apology, urging him to remain an active part of the community. As the wedding day inched closer, Ezra and Drake Coleman resumed finalizing details, flowers, table placements, and the guest list. The latter had been overshadowed by Karen's intrusions, but now the joy of the occasion re-emerged, shining through the cracks of the recent drama. Neighbors pitched in, some volunteering to help load tables into a rented truck, others offering to watch the house while the Coleman brothers were away at the rehearsal dinner. Karen, on the other hand, had vanished behind closed doors. The police had processed her for filing a false report, alongside allegations of lock tampering and trespassing. A court date loomed, and she faced an uncertain future, stripped of her self-assumed authority. Rumor had it she might sell her place to pay legal fees, a prospect that no one in Ocean View Estate seemed to mourn. Late one evening, after packing the last box of decorative napkins for the wedding, Ezra sat on his porch, gazing at the calm street. Where once he'd fretted about every passing car that might bring more conflict, he now watched neighbors stroll by, nodding and smiling. The transformation felt surreal, a testament to how adversity could galvanize a community's empathy. It wasn't that the fiasco left no scars, the entire ordeal still echoed in the corners of his mind. But the sense of belonging, absent at first, now blossomed. People recognized his quiet perseverance, admired how he defended his property with calm proof rather than anger. And with the biggest day of his brother's life just around the corner, Ezra found a renewed appreciation for home, friendship, and the resilience that overcame even the ugliest forms of harassment. Weeks after the dramatic arrest of Karen, Commander Rowan Perez stood on the porch of his cozy cottage in Riverbend Hollow, sipping morning coffee in a far calmer atmosphere than before. The swirl of tension that had once cast a shadow over the block dissipated after she faced legal consequences for her lock-changing scheme, false claims of rent, and baseless 911 calls. No more harassing notes left in the mailbox, no more suspicious stares from neighbors unsure of the truth. Rowan exhaled in relief each time he recalled the moment of closure. Local chatter moved on from scandal to mundane neighborhood concerns, like scheduling trash pickup or planning a summer block party. People no longer whispered about that new homeowner, or questioned his right to be in the house he'd rightfully purchased. Instead, they greeted Rowan with friendly waves, acknowledging the resilience he'd shown in the face of adversity. A few even joked about how they'd avoided contact previously, misled by Karen's bold accusations. Now, seeing her indicted for her misdeeds, they regretted not stepping forward sooner. Meanwhile, Officer Chen made a formal visit to provide Rowan with final updates on Karen's case. According to the officer, Karen had pleaded not guilty at her hearing, claiming it was a misunderstanding. But the evidence, video footage of her inside Rowan's cottage uninvited, her forcibly changed lock, and the official record of her calls to 911, painted a damning picture. The DA's office planned to pursue charges that could include breaking and entering, filing a false report, and possible hate-based intimidation if a motive was established. Rowan's brother, Milo Perez, arrived soon after, boisterously congratulating him on concluding the fiasco. "It's about time, big brother," Milo quipped, eyes dancing over the neat arrangement of leftover wedding decor. "You can finally enjoy married life yourself, or just plain life, without fear that someone's inside changing your locks." Rowan laughed, tension melting away as the mention of lock tampering sounded almost comedic in retrospect. News of Karen's downfall reverberated quietly through Riverbend Hollow. Some neighbors seemed relieved that her negative influence waned. Others, who once joined her in petty complaints, found themselves rethinking how easily rumor could overshadow reason. Through it all, Rowan felt the warmth of a community learning from its mistakes, re-embracing the values of tolerance and verified facts. Early one Saturday, Rowan found a small basket of fresh muffins on his porch, a note attached, "Thank you for standing up for truth. Sorry for the trouble." The signature was indecipherable, but the gesture was clear. People recognized the injustice done to him and appreciated his calm resolve. Standing amid the gentle morning sunshine, Rowan felt a deep satisfaction in the knowledge that no lock, no false complaint, and no manufactured suspicion could keep him from living peacefully in his own home. As he closed the door behind him, the memory of Karen's brazen intrusion faded further, replaced by a serene confidence that Riverbend Hollow was, at last, truly welcoming him as part of its fabric.